So hello, thank you very much for joining us for this next episode of Wander into Wellbeing, where we are covering some basic habits around self-care that are potentially helpful right now. My name is Aurea. I'm also going to be joined by my colleague Keith Goddard. We're from Reason to Be, so we're all about helping individuals to thrive, not just survive. And today our focus is going to be on emotional well-being. So right now it's an unusual time, and it's likely that we're all going to be experiencing quite a range of different emotions. So it's completely unprecedented is what a lot of people are saying. It is likely that we are sort of just as part of the territory going to be having a lot of different things come up for us emotionally at the moment. And it's likely that those things are going to be changing both from day to day, but also just even within the day, as we go through from hour to hour, and moving quite rapidly perhaps between how we feel. So all a bit like an emotional soup, a big vat of things all swirling around at the moment, and that's to be expected. And in the mix of all of that, we're likely to be experiencing some things which are helpful. So we particularly don't talk about emotions as being good or bad, but just in terms of whether they're helpful or unhelpful for you at that moment. So helpful emotions we might be experiencing are around feeling optimistic or positive about a challenge that we've been able to overcome or an achievement that we've nailed. We might be feeling particularly grateful for aspects of our life at the moment, or just happy that we are able to spend a bit more time with family. But in the mix, probably also some things that are unhelpful. So maybe feeling fear or anxiety about the future because of the uncertainty, maybe feeling particularly angry at the behavior of other people or the things that we can't control right now. So all that completely normal and to be expected. But when it comes to our emotional well-being, the sort of the thing to hold on to is not to try and fight or wrestle or grapple with our emotions. So not trying to fight with them, not trying to just wish that we didn't have those emotions, that won't make them go away, not feeling bad or beating ourselves up for having a particular reaction. But the habit that we need to sort of get into is one of just being alongside the emotions that we're experiencing at the moment. Thinking in a way that helps us to be aware, to be curious about what our emotional response is, but not to be judgmental with ourselves. And in order to help us do that, Keith's now going to share some techniques which allow us to look at our emotions perhaps in a slightly different way.
Hi guys, thanks Aurea. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about to begin with is what we call notice and naming your emotions. As Aurea said, sometimes we get hijacked and embroiled with our emotions, which is less helpful to us. So one of the things that's useful as a technique is to try and get above your emotions and to look down on them, if that makes sense. If you're in the middle of your emotions, it's very, very difficult to make sense of them and to function properly. So I personally, what I try and do is imagine I'm flying in a hot air balloon over the savannas of Africa and to look down on particular emotions. And again, like a lot of these techniques we talk about, it takes practice. So you probably won't get this first time, but it's worth trying. One of the important things about notice and naming is being able to define your emotions. And defining them and naming them helps you encircle your emotion rather than your emotion encircling you. And that gives you a little bit more of an element of feeling of control as well. One of the useful things to try and do if you're managing to name certain emotions is just observe yourself. So again, imagine yourself in a hot air balloon on top of a mountain, in a helicopter, just actually flying yourself if you want to, but visualize yourself getting above them and observing yourself. And some of the things you're trying to observe is what happens, when it happens, who does it happen with, and where does it happen. And already talked a little bit about emotional soup. So it can be a whole mix of things tied to one emotion, or it can be a whole host of emotions tied to one thing. So it could be actually when you're trying to work at home in the current situation, there's lots of noise in the background and you can feel a certain emotion happening in your body. It could be actually when you're outdoors and people aren't keeping their social distance, you start feeling a certain emotion. So one of the things we try and get people to do is just spend time being above your emotions to observe what's actually happening, when it happens, who it happens with, and where it happens, and just trying to start making sense of that and making a bit of a log. What we know from all the research and practice is that emotions tend to have 3 additional components to them, or 3 components that sit alongside emotions, and that's thought processes, sensory experiences, and physical reactions. So when you're doing that observation of what, when, who, and where, what you're trying to do is to tag in, okay, what's happening in my head thought-wise, sensory-wise, what's happening, and what's happened to me physically. I think it's important to get to know your emotions and be their friend. I think Aurea mentioned getting alongside them. So one of the ways to do that, for me, a good technique, and it helps you get to understand them a little bit more, is try to do some comparisons with your emotions. So if this emotion was a colour, what colour would it be? If this emotion was the weather, what weather would it be? If this emotion was a landscape, what would the landscape look like? If this emotion was a piece of music, what would the music be? What would it sound like? And if this emotion was a smell, what would it smell like? And you can mix all of that up, but what you're trying to do is to get a multi-sensory approach to your emotions and give them tags. And that sometimes really gets you under the skin of your own emotions to understand them a little bit more. And that really just helps you to choose which emotion you want to spend time with in that active choice. And being comfortable being alongside some of the less helpful emotions, but not grappling with them. I think one of the things to think about as well is be kind to yourself with your emotions. Sometimes we get secondary emotions, so we may feel angry about something, and then we may feel guilty about feeling angry. So then you've got 2 emotions going on at the same time. So sometimes it's okay to feel a certain way, so be kind on yourself. I think to summarise that piece as a technique of noticing naming, what I would say is the earlier you name your emotions, the earlier you can intervene with them. What I'd like to move on to now is just some very specific techniques to help us to be alongside our emotions, to be above them, and to help you choose how you want to be in the moment. So one of the techniques we talk about is distracting. If you've watched the mental health, mental well-being slot, we talk a little bit about some of these techniques on there as well. But specifically for helping you with your emotions, one of the big distraction techniques is breathing, believe it or not. So sometimes if you're in the midst of an emotional piece of soup getting hijacked, is just take 6 deep belly breaths, or diaphragmatic breaths as technically known. 7-11 breathing, we've talked about that before. So that helps you relax a little bit more, or you can do box or squared breathing. So any breathing techniques that allows you to be a little bit more alongside your emotions rather than grappling with them, or above your emotions, whatever language you want to use. So sometimes I get quite frustrated. I'm not that patient at times, and I feel that rising in my diaphragm, and I can feel it rising up. So what I do, as soon as I feel it here, I just take 6 deep belly breaths, and that actually, more often than not, just actually helps me do 2 things. One, relax a little bit more, but actually brings me in the moment with my emotions and helps me recognize that I may be starting to have an unhelpful emotion. It doesn't make me feel less patient sometimes, but what it does, it helps me to be more in the moment with a more helpful emotion. So that's the breathing bit. I think sometimes just taking a break. So if you're emotionally hijacked, feel a bit angry or a bit upset, is actually just physically taking a break. So what I mean by that, if you're sitting down, stand up, go for a bit of a walk, go and make a coffee, just get up and turn around. So you're changing your position wherever you might be. Even going for a quick 5-minute walk. Changing perspective. So sometimes just actually turning around and looking at something different actually can help break that emotional hijack. Sometimes I personally put my headphones on if the family are in the house and stuff, and just play some loud music. Just actually really loud music. For me, it doesn't make much difference for this exercise where it is, but just some loud music that actually breaks the emotional chain. Sometimes just laughing out loud as well. So going reading a joke book, watching 5 minutes of comedy on TV. But basically, what you're trying to do is to take a break from your emotional state. So that's what we call distracting. Number of other techniques, and you can get some of those on our mental well-being in soundbite. Let's move on to distancing. Remember, emotions are fleeting things. They have a time period to them. So I guess with distancing, what you're trying to do is accelerate that time period. Also with distancing, what you're trying to do is to turn the volume down on your emotions. So if you want to feel less angry, it's trying to turn the volume down on that anger. And sometimes it's just imagining that, closing your eyes and thinking about what less angry would look like and feel like. Another good technique is what we call journaling your emotions. So if you're emotionally hijacked, feeling a certain way, is write it down. How do you feel? And sometimes trying to think about when you felt very different to that. I think to round this session up on distancing, I think one thing to say is, remember, an emotion is only one reaction to a particular thing. So get above it, observe it, and sometimes watching other people come into that situation, how might they feel? So that's a good way to distance yourself from your own emotions. What we're going to move on to now is just some of the techniques. So one thing you'll have heard about, because it's in the press and has been even before COVID happened, is mindfulness. So being mindful or being in the moment or choosing to be with something is a really powerful technique to help you be alongside your emotions. Sometimes to distract you from them, sometimes to distancing. And mindfulness is a particularly good distancing technique. So learn mindfulness, be mindful. We talked about this in other parts, but in essence, you can be mindful about anything: eating, music, walking. The key thing is trying to make it multisensory. So one of the good, powerful techniques, I think, is using what we call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you're on a walk, 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can touch, and maybe 1 thing that you can taste, so long as it's safe. And that act will help you be in the moment and be mindful of your walk. And you can do the same with food, with music. Sometimes you don't need to use all 5 senses. Sometimes it may be just 2 or 3. But the whole act of trying to find 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 things is really useful to be mindful. Another technique is rating your emotions. So give them a number. Some people like to do it out of 100. Some people like to do it out of 10. Some people like to do it out of 5. But actually putting a physical number to how you're feeling at this moment is quite a powerful thing. Some people would use a volume control or a gas control on a cooker to visualize where they are. And the act of just visually turning it down in your own mind's eye. And you can even see what I'm doing, just that act of turning down sometimes will help you actually tone down the emotion that you're having. So picture it. Another technique is reversing it. So if you're feeling in a particular way, so if you're feeling very, very sad, what does very, very happy look like? And can you take yourself to a place where you were very, very happy? So that's quite good. And again, use your senses to do that as well. I guess for me, there's a piece of just knowing the emotional spectrum. So for example, if you're angry, that can be helpful or unhelpful, most often not unhelpful for a lot of people. Dial it down to annoyance. But what does annoyance look like to you, and what's the difference, and what numbers would you put against it? And finally, I guess, is fear. So fear is quite a strong, powerful emotion. What does apprehension look like, which is a dial down from it? So if fear was 8 or 9, apprehension might be 5 or 6. So that's what we call rate and reverse, and a little bit on mindfulness. The final piece I'll touch on in terms of tools and techniques is talk a little bit about being your own thought friend. So quite often we're quite judgmental about ourselves, quite critical of ourselves, and these have an emotional component. So I guess for me, imagine yourself being somebody else. And what would they say to you? Or what would you say to other people if they were feeling the way that you're feeling in this moment? As Aurea said, don't grapple with your emotions, get alongside them. Sometimes it's useful to try and write down what thoughts you're having with what particular emotions, and befriending both of those. And again, visual techniques are really, really good. So imagine what anger looks like and trying to be the friend of anger, and what does that friend look like? That's really good technique to have. Sometimes just writing a message to those unhelpful emotions is really good. Write a postcard to them in a friendly and kind type of way. Remember, as I've said, emotions are very fleeting things. Aurea is going to talk a little bit about moods, which are more sustained emotional states or more sustained feeling states. So Aurea, over to you for some more tools and techniques.
Thanks very much indeed, Keith. So yes, mood is a bit different to emotion. It's a bit less intense. So our emotions tend to be very up and down. Our mood tends to sort of shift a little bit more gradually and be a bit less intense in our experience of that. And also they tend to last a bit longer when we think about moods. So they tend to be things that go on a little bit longer. And so that does mean that they can creep up on us. So sometimes we're not always aware of the shift and change in our mood, like we might be if we are thinking about a change in emotion that we can sometimes experience, as Keith said, in lots of different ways, including physically, quite intensely, which kind of tunes us in. So when it comes to mood, it can be useful just to check in perhaps a number of times during the day, just in terms of where your mood has got to, where there are some shifts or change that are happening. And that's just so that you can be aware, so that you can then decide whether you're going to sort of stick or twist, as it were. So are you going to stick because it's helpful and it's where you want to be, or do you need to twist? Do you need to do something else about the situation? So that's really what mood mastering is all about. It's about understanding, taking some time to explore the things that help us to lift and shift the mood that we have, in order that we can then choose to do something about it. And so just going to talk again about some techniques here that might be helpful if you do decide that actually the mood that you're currently in is not entirely helpful and you want to make a bit of a shift. So the first one I'm going to touch on is what we describe as happy bedtime. And this is about making sure that you go to bed in a way that is as helpful as possible for your mood at that point, to let you to go sleep easily, but also thinking about what you're likely to wake up feeling the next day. So one of the things that can be really helpful is this act of journaling. And we've talked about sort of writing things down, inking it, not thinking it, and using the art of getting things out of your head in a number of ways on the other kind of webinars. But on this instance, what we're talking about is just jotting down 3 things before you go to sleep that you are grateful for that have happened during the day, or just small things that you're pleased with, you're happy about. And they can be really super small if it's been a very challenging day, but it's always about finding 3 things to start changing the shift of your attention and your focus. And also the act of smiling as you're falling asleep can be really powerful. So we've again touched on the act of smiling a number of times before, but forcing yourself to actually smile and to really properly smile out loud and keep smiling as you're falling asleep can be a really helpful way to change your mood. So give it a try, see what you find. And also thinking consciously about the kind of mood that you might want to wake up in. So thinking about that as you fall asleep, to think about and sort of position yourself for the next day. So just a few things all around that kind of bedtime routine that can be helpful. Music can also be a great way to change your mood. So thinking about putting together some little mini playlists, so maybe 3 or 4 songs for a particular genre or the type of thing that you know will make you feel in a different way, and so that you've got about sort of 10 or 15 minutes to just give yourself a bit of a blast for something that you know will help. And just as an example of that, one of the things that I was thinking about recently was wanting to put a playlist together in relation to something that would make me feel really energetic and really up for things when I needed it. And I remembered, I'm going to show my age now, but I remembered when I was at university the first time, a really good friend of mine, Katie, did me this mixtape. See, I'm showing my age now. And basically this was what she called Aurea's Getting Ready to Go Clubbing tape. And it's got some great songs on it that at the time made me feel brilliant, made me feel really up for it, really energetic about going out for the night. And so I've recreated some of that on Spotify and bring myself right up to date. But basically so that I can hold on to some of those tunes and songs that made me feel so good at the time, and recreate some of that in my mood if I'm needing that. Humour, as Keith was talking about in terms of distancing, humour is also great when it comes to your mood. So thinking about peppering your day with things that will make you laugh out loud. So what kind of jokes, what kind of humour that will really just give you a bit of a belly laugh and will just help you to sort of start to lift and shift your mood can be really helpful. And the other thing that we know is a real helpful kind of avenue when it comes to thinking about our mood is physical activity. So using that as a different route. So we know that 10 minutes of really vigorous activity is a great way to lift your mood if you're wanting to make that shift. But equally doing physical activity, which is a bit more gentle, which is a bit more relaxed, also helps perhaps bring mood down if you want to feel calmer, if you want to feel a bit more serene. And again, obviously you can combine a number of things. So you might want to also think about the music that you would put together with that if you were trying to either lift yourself through exercise or to get a bit more peaceful. And the other thing to be aware of when it comes to our mood is also to think about people that can have an impact on our mood. So there might be times if you're trying to make a real shift in your mood that there are certain people, sometimes call them sort of mood hoovers, that might, potentially affect your mood in a particular way, and you might want to either think about being with those people, or if they're real mood hoovers, actually avoiding those people when you're trying to make a particular change in your own mood. So we hope we've covered there a number of things that you would be able to hold on to, put into practice. And remember, as we've said before, it is about seeking to take control of those things which are in your control right now, and there might be more things than you are aware of in this emotional space. And also getting some things ready so that when you are looking to your recharge time, when you've got your 15 minutes, you can actually pick and choose the things that are going to be helpful to your emotional well-being at that point, because you've got some resources there to help you. So we hope that you find that helpful in terms of just some key things around your emotional well-being that might be helpful at the moment. Obviously, as always, do remember that it's not just one thing when it comes to well-being. We need to be looking at all of the different strands working together holistically in terms of how they can support each other. So thank you very much for joining us. Do always remember to think about how you can put these into practice regularly, thinking about that recharge 15 time that you've got. And we very much look forward to seeing you again on the next episode.